It happened one evening when the conversation between us had stretched longer than usual. We had talked about work, about memories that still made her smile, and about the weight of expectations that sometimes left both of us feeling drained. As the silence settled, I realized I couldn't keep my feelings hidden any longer. For weeks I had been holding them back, convincing myself that I should be patient, that maybe the right moment would come. But as I looked at her then, listening with the same warmth she always carried, I knew if I didn't speak now, I might never forgive myself. My voice shook slightly when I began, but I steadied myself. I told her she had become more than a friend to me, that her presence had changed the way I saw my days. I admitted that she had given me something I had been searching for, a reason to feel alive, to believe that I could be seen for who I was. I told her that I wanted more than conversations that ended when the day was done. I wanted her to know that I cared about her deeply, that the thought of her filled the emptiness I had carried for so long. For a few moments, she didn't respond. Her eyes held mine, but her silence pressed down on me like a weight. I feared I had said too much, that I had crossed into a space she wasn't ready for. Finally, she let out a quiet breath and spoke with a gentleness that cut deeper than any harsh word could. She said, "You're a good guy. You'll find someone." Her words landed softly, but inside they felt like a storm. On the surface, it was kindness, but beneath it, I could hear the truth. She wasn't choosing me. My heart tightened as I tried to understand, tried to accept what she was really saying. She wasn't rejecting me out of cruelty. She was protecting something in herself that I could not touch. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I didn't want someone. I wanted her, but I stopped myself. Love cannot be begged into existence, and I refused to turn her honesty into guilt. She explained slowly, almost as if she owed me more than those simple words. She said she valued me, that I had brought comfort into her life, that our connection was real, but not the kind of real that could grow into the future I imagined. She said she wasn't in the place to give her heart fully, that she didn't want to hurt me by offering only half of herself. Listening to her, I felt both pain and respect. She didn't push me away with excuses. She gave me the truth, even though it hurt to hear. I nodded, though my throat ached with words I didn't speak. I told her I understood, even if part of me wanted to fight it. She smiled sadly, as if she wished things could be different, and in that look I saw how much it cost her to say those words. Walking away later, I carried the weight of her kindness and her refusal all at once. It wasn't anger that filled me, but a deep ache that settled in the quiet corners of my heart. I had laid myself bare, and though she couldn't choose me, I couldn't regret that I had been honest about what she meant to me. I replayed her words over and over, each time hearing them in a slightly different way. At first, all I could feel was the sting of rejection, the heaviness of being told once again that I was a good guy but not the one chosen. It was a phrase that seemed to follow me like a shadow, reminding me of every time I had stood on the edge of something that felt like love, only to watch it slip away. But as the days passed, I began to listen to her voice in my memory with a different kind of clarity. She hadn't dismissed me. She had given me honesty wrapped in kindness, and that meant more than silence or false hope ever could. When I told her, everyone just wants to be loved, it wasn't meant as a protest or an attempt to change her mind. It was a truth I carried in my heart, one that belonged not only to me but to everyone who had ever longed to be seen for who they were. I realized that in that moment, I wasn't just speaking about myself. I was speaking about her too. She wanted love as much as I did. She just couldn't find it in me. That didn't make her cruel, and it didn't make me unworthy. It simply meant our paths had crossed in a way that wasn't meant to last forever. The more I thought about it, the more I began to see how valuable the experience had been, even if it didn't end the way I hoped. She had reminded me of what it felt like to open my heart again. She had shown me that I was still capable of connection, still capable of feeling deeply after so many disappointments. Losing her hurt, but in that hurt was proof that my heart hadn't gone numb. It was still beating, still searching, still ready to give itself when the right person came along. I promised myself I wouldn't let bitterness take root. I had seen people turn cold after rejection, building walls so high that no one could ever climb them.
I didn't want that for myself.
Her honesty gave me strength to believe that being genuine was never wasted, even if it didn't lead to the ending I had imagined. She had valued me for who I was, even if she couldn't choose me, and that was worth holding on to. With time, the ache softened into gratitude. Gratitude for the late conversations, for the laughter that broke through my loneliness, for the reminder that vulnerability isn't weakness. Gratitude that she had given me a truth I could grow from instead of a silence that would have left me guessing. I carried her words with me, not as a wound, but as a lesson. I understood now that everyone is searching, everyone is longing for the same thing, to be loved in a way that feels safe, true, and lasting. She couldn't give that to me, but she helped me see that I deserved it and that one day someone would. As I moved forward, I found myself holding on to hope more firmly than before. Not the desperate hope of someone afraid of being alone, but the quiet hope of someone who knows love is worth waiting for. The story between us had ended, but it left behind a chapter that shaped me, one that reminded me that my kindness wasn't a flaw and my honesty wasn't wasted. And in that understanding, I finally felt ready to keep going, carrying with me the belief that love, real love, will find its way when the time is right. The days that followed carried an unspoken current between us, a quiet rhythm of glances and pauses that neither of us openly acknowledged. Every time I visited, there was a strange awareness in the air. She remained kind and composed, but there were small moments that revealed more than words ever could. A lingering smile, the way her tone softened when speaking to me, the subtle warmth in her eyes. All these things combined to stir emotions I tried hard to keep in check. I told myself repeatedly that nothing should happen, that some lines are too important to cross, yet my heart raced whenever I found myself alone in her presence. I began to notice that our conversations had shifted. They weren't just polite exchanges anymore. They carried depth. She would ask about my dreams, my fears, and how I truly felt about life. No one had ever asked me questions with such genuine curiosity. When I spoke, she listened in a way that made me feel valued, like my words held weight. That simple act of listening drew me in more than I realized, because it wasn't just about attraction, it was about feeling understood in a way I rarely experienced. At the same time, the complexity of the situation pressed heavily on me. Every time my friend laughed with me, I felt a pang of guilt. I wondered what he would think if he knew how my heart quickened around his mother. That thought alone was enough to make me hesitate, yet hesitation couldn't undo what was already happening inside me. The more I tried to fight it, the more I realized how strong the connection had become. It wasn't deliberate, it wasn't sought out, but it was real. One afternoon, when I was about to leave, she stopped me with a simple question. "Are you happy?" The way she asked it was not casual. It was loaded with sincerity, as if she truly cared about the answer. I stumbled for words, unsure of what to say, but finally admitted that I often felt like something was missing in my life. She nodded, almost knowingly, and her expression softened in a way that said she understood more than I could explain. That single exchange stayed with me long after I left. It wasn't about romance, at least not directly. It was about connection, a recognition that went beyond circumstances. The conflict within me deepened. Part of me wanted to pull back, to restore the normal balance and forget the moments that made me feel this way. Another part of me couldn't bear the thought of losing the closeness that had formed. It was a quiet tug-of-war between reason and desire, between loyalty and longing. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew that something had already changed between us forever. It was no longer possible to see her the way I once did, and the realization left me both unsettled and drawn in even closer. Time has a way of forcing clarity, and eventually I realized that what mattered most wasn't the intensity of the moments we had shared, but the choices that came afterward. I couldn't escape the fact that she was my friend's mother, a figure of stability and respect in his life, and I owed it to both of them to tread carefully. Yet despite this, the memory of her words, her looks, and the quiet way she had connected with me lingered constantly in my thoughts. It wasn't something I could erase, and it wasn't something I could explain easily to anyone else. It felt like a story I would carry within me, unspoken but unforgettable. What surprised me most was the maturity she showed in handling it all. She never crossed a line, never made promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she gave me something I hadn't realized I needed, a sense of being seen, respected, and valued for who I was in that moment of my life. It made me understand that sometimes the greatest impact someone can have isn't through grand gestures, but through quiet recognition. She had reminded me of my own worth at a time when I doubted it, and for that, I felt gratitude more than anything else. The pull I felt toward her was real, but so was the responsibility of knowing when to step back. In the end, we both seemed to understand without words that our paths couldn't cross in the way I once thought possible. Life required us to preserve the balance, to leave the story as it was, a chapter that would remain locked in memory rather than something that turned into regret. The silence between us was not awkward. It was filled with mutual respect and a kind of unspoken understanding that we had chosen what was right, even if it wasn't what we secretly wanted. Over time, I found myself reflecting on what it had taught me. I realized that love and connection are not always about permanence or possession. Sometimes they are about the fleeting spark that opens your eyes to what you truly value in relationships. She had shown me the importance of being cared for, of being listened to, and of being encouraged to see myself differently. Those lessons stayed with me, shaping how I approached people afterward, making me more open and more genuine in my connections. Looking back now, I don't see it as a story of missed opportunity, but rather as one of growth. She was a part of my life at a crucial moment, and though the nature of our bond was complicated, it was real and it mattered. It was proof that even the most unexpected encounters can leave a lasting imprint on the heart. Not every story is meant to end in a declaration of love or a shared future. Some are meant to remind us of who we are, of what we're capable of feeling, and of the quiet strength it takes to walk away with dignity. That was the true ending, and perhaps the most meaningful one of all.